And I can bring in another guest now. I have Intisar Rabb, who is a professor of law at Harvard Law School. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Intisar, just tell us, as you see Muhammad Ali's body going through the streets of Louisville, you see the people who've turned out. What do you think his legacy is to American life?
I think his legacy is wrapped up in the quote that was repeated by President Obama, "I am America." And what followed that was saying that I am different from mainstream America, but I am someone who is a champion of justice and of the values that I hold dear, of a religion that may be different from the majority religion. And those are all things that have been an inspiration to me, and I think a great part of his legacy.
He said, didn't he, "My name, not yours, my religion, not yours. Get
yes.
used to it."
Yes, yeah. So, I mean,
and that was 40 years ago, that
Exactly. I've traveled abroad a lot in the Muslim world, and whenever anyone asks me, "Who are you?" and I say I'm American Muslim, they didn't understand what that meant, and I said, "Well, like Muhammad Ali," and then it was all clear.
Everyone gets
and they
it.
said, "Yeah, so Muhammad Ali Clay," as they called him.
Yeah. And well, it's so interesting as well because he gave up that name, Cassius Clay. He was actually named for an abolitionist, in fact, but a white abolitionist.
Right.
So he called it a slave name.
Right, which was following after the Nation of Islam.
But if we think that
teachings.
this was, 1963 when he declared that he was called Muhammad Ali, I mean, that must have been like a seismic shock through America at that time.
I think it was. Here is the most prominent athlete we have, not only in America, but perhaps the world, even at that time. And for him to say that he's now a member of the Muslim community and that his fight against injustice and his declining to go to Vietnam was because of his religious belief, religious law, Islamic law, which I study. You know, that's phenomenal. It's a seismic shift indeed.
Well, it's so interesting that President Obama, after Muhammad Ali died, said that he has a pair of his boxing gloves and a picture of him, a famous picture of him when he wins, an epochal fight. So he's an inspiration to a figure like President Obama too.
Right. And President Obama, I can't tell you how many offices I walk into at law schools when I go visit law schools, my own law school at Harvard Law School, at other congressional offices that have some Muhammad Ali picture or Muhammad Ali story. So it's amazing to see the sort of saturation of Muhammad Ali around America and in the upper echelons of decision making and of justice, where hopefully it's a real reminder to the lessons of justice from faith.
Well, and also if we think back, when he was the Olympic champion in Rome in 1960, that was before civil rights. That was before African Americans had the same legal rights as white people in America. He grew up in a very segregated part of Louisville. So the life that he was forged in is one that hopefully does no longer exist.
Well, there are vestiges. The fight continues. And of course, the 1965 Act that brought about the Civil Rights Act of 1965, it came on the heels of fights like his beginning from the 1960s and before. And I think the continuing fight for justice, it goes on after that.
But I guess my point is that his achievement was all the more extraordinary because of the conditions that he grew up in of legal segregation.
Right, he still had legal Jim Crow segregation era, and so that does make his stand especially important and another part of his legacy to have courage to stand up for justice even when it seems like the law is against you. I love the quote when he was talking about the Supreme Court case, and it's often said that he's probably the most prominent person to have taken on the U.S. government and won.
This is when he was fighting the draft.
Right.
And then fighting the fact that they had banned him from boxing.
Right. And he said, well, people say the option is that I either go to fight or I go to prison, but there's a third option here, and that's justice. And he had to wait some time for justice, but justice did prevail, and I think that's a testament to Ali's faith and what you can do with the system if you're persistent and you have that kind of courage.
And he planned this day so very carefully. He choreographed it. This is what he wanted. And yesterday, of course, he had the Muslim prayer ritual.
Right.
And that was obviously hugely important to him. What do you think he was trying to underscore with that? Because he knew how much attention that would bring.
Well, I think what more than what he was trying to underscore, it may be what he was not trying to underscore. So he was very much Muslim, and everyone knew that. But he also gave explicit instructions that he did not want it to be a political event. He wanted it to be an all-inclusive event. So it's the fact that he's underscoring that it's inclusivity, like his life attested to, but then also that it should be about spirituality and a returning home. Muslims say, to God we belong, and to God is the return upon death. And I thought that's what the janazah funeral prayer symbolized, that it's a symbol that it's one community, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, that belongs to God or children of God in Muslim or Christian terminology, and it was a homecoming.
And what do you make of the fact that clearly he's such an important figure to Muslims around the world? I mean, we have the president of Turkey here. We have a wreath laid in the name of the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Right, so it's phenomenal. It means that he was unabashedly, like we talked about in that quote, that he is America. He's unabashedly American, unabashedly Muslim, and at the same time he saw himself as a global citizen, as a human being. And I think that the Muslim world and the globe, even beyond the Muslim world, recognized that message and valued him for that.
And in his final years, of course, he was dogged by Parkinson's, and yet he still had this public profile, didn't he?
He still had a public profile because he was a great philanthropist, and he had a sharp mind that continued to want to add good to the world and contribute to mentoring young people and to public works. The Ali Center, where we are right now, is a wonderful monument to that. I mean, it's such an interactive display of his legacy, but then also a message educating young people as to what they can do when they work hard in life. And so I think that's another wonderful part of his legacy.
And when you think about him and when you teach, do you bring him into your teachings?
I have not explicitly done that, although I have a project where I have a work in progress where I'm planning to teach on the Muhammad Ali case, and it's part of a project called Civil Rights Sharia, where there are different understandings of Sharia that are usually bad right now, but Muhammad Ali's understanding of Sharia, and that's what drove his work, was in the civil rights context, and it was for justice, it was against discrimination, and it's something that I'd like to highlight and tease out the more that we can explore his case and his life through this civil rights Sharia concept.
And Intisar, just a final question really, but what does Muhammad Ali mean to you as an American, as a Muslim, as a scholar?
Muhammad Ali is, he's a beautiful person, and it was like losing a family member. And I very much thought that, like I said, whenever I mentioned Muhammad Ali, people immediately understood me and who I was, and sort of the odd chances of having an American Muslim scholar, law professor. The fact that Muhammad Ali could be who he was said that I could be who I was, and I think many people have that same story, which is beautiful.
It is indeed. Intisar Rabb from Harvard Law School, thank you so much for joining us here on BBC News. Thank you. So many memories of Muhammad Ali today, as his car containing his casket processes through Louisville.